Hello there, little masters, and welcome to another weekly episode of the Prancing Pony Podcast, where tonight the good stuff is truly fit for the Elvenking's table.
West to Hall, my friends. I'm Sean Marchese, the real-life Lord of the Mark, and I'm here with the man of the West, the chief guard to my elven butler, Alan Sisto.
You lush. Let's see how long we can go before nodding off. Folks, tonight we start Chapter 9 of The Hobbit, Barrels Out of Bond, which is not the latest Bond film, just to make sure you know that.
That would be a fantastic Bond film.
Wouldn't it? It would be Bond out of barrels, but yeah.
Bond. I would watch Martin Freeman as James Bond in that. I'm just saying.
Martin Freeman as James Bond. Wow.
It would be an interesting, fresh take on the character.
A very fresh take is certainly one way to put it. Yeah, it's fresh something.
He's an excellent Bilbo. He's an excellent Arthur Dent. James Bond,
maybe not so much.
Maybe not so much, but
Arthur Dent. I'd almost forgotten that was a travesty of a film, but he was pretty good in it.
It had its moments.
It did.
There was some fun stuff to it, but yeah.
Arthur Dent.
Yeah, Dent Arthur Dent. You will be late, as in the late Dent Arthur Dent. All right, let's introduce this episode. Man,
we digressed really early this time, didn't we?
But I do love this chapter title because it tells you exactly what it's about to happen, doesn't it?
Yeah.
And this is just one of my favorite chapters. I mean, you've got elves, you've got wine, you've got a barrel ride down a river, you got first stage pneumonia. What could be better, right? But I suppose I am getting ahead of myself.
Yes, you are. Before we begin, how about another, it's been a long time since we've done one of these, Tolkien quote of the day.
It has been a really long time, and I would love to bring one up because I've got one of my favorite quotes for the segment today. And you'll know why it's one of my favorites in a moment. So in 1955, Tolkien wrote a letter to W.H. Auden, the poet. Auden and Tolkien actually corresponded for years, starting in 1955 when Auden was reviewing The Lord of the Rings for the New York Times Book Review and another magazine called Encounter. Well, Tolkien's letter to Auden in June 1955, which is published as Letter 163, is full of great stuff. There's the bit about saving spiders in the bath. We talked about that last time.
Yeah, just last episode.
Yeah, that comes from that letter. But today I want to share a quote from Tolkien that describes his discovery of the Finnish language, which we know was a really big step on the road to, the creation of his languages and the creation of his legendarium.
True.
So here's the quote. He said, "Most important, perhaps, after Gothic, or the discovery of the Gothic language, was the discovery in Exeter College Library, when I was supposed to be reading for honor mods, of a Finnish grammar. It was like discovering a complete wine cellar, filled with bottles of an amazing wine of a kind and flavor never tasted before. It quite intoxicated me, and I gave up the attempt to invent an unrecorded Germanic language, and my own language, or series of invented languages, became heavily Finnicized in phonetic pattern and structure." Well, of course, that Finnicized language he's talking about is what ultimately became Quenya.
That's right.
And I just love this description of discovering a language for the first time. He's this wine cellar comparison.
It's very vivid, isn't it?
It really is. It's so sensory. Immediately I'm struck by the idea of tasting an unfamiliar language like a fine wine, and I'm not really a wine guy, but, I drink wine occasionally, and you think of some of the terminology people use, sure. You just imagine it being a very exotic and complex experience. And here he is comparing the Finnish language to not just one wine, but many, an entire cellar.
Cellar filled.
Yeah, it's like this idea of an entire world opening up linguistically for him, and it's just a fantastic image.
Oh, it is. This vintage noun has a smooth bouquet and just a note of blackberry. Or something. Goes great with the prepositional phrase.
There you go. See? It writes itself, man.
This is when the teetotaler in me comes out because I really don't have a grounds on which to kind of compare this. But I do love the description. I can at least understand it.
Yeah. You had me fooled. And like I said, I'm not much of a wine guy, but I can kind of get where he's coming from.
Yeah, I certainly understand the analogy well enough. It's not like I'm utterly naive. What is wine? I have not. I know the world.
See, we start with grapes.
Yeah. But I love this reference of the cellar because it makes me think of Tolkien's own words about the phrase cellar door from the essay English and Welsh, which is funny because Finnish is what inspired Quenya, and then Welsh, of course, is what inspired Sindarin. But out of that essay, English and Welsh, he says, Most English-speaking people, for instance, will admit that cellar door is beautiful, especially if dissociated from its sense and from its spelling. More beautiful than, say, sky, and far more beautiful than beautiful, which is interesting. I mean, he has a point. Certain words are more pleasant to say and to hear, and though I have to admit I'm nowhere near enough of a linguist to understand quite why, the phrase cellar door does roll quite nicely off the tongue.
Yeah, it really does, and that's a really good catch that you thought of that. The other time that he mentioned cellar, very prominently in one of his essays, and we do talk about this cellar door. The idea of cellar door being a beautiful phrase. We talk about that a lot. Contrary to popular belief, Tolkien wasn't the first person to mention the beauty of this phrase.
That's right.
I mean, I've looked it up before. It's hard to know exactly where it first popped up, but I know it has appeared in print as early as like 1903, 1905, something like that.
My goodness.
So, a good 50 years before Tolkien's English and Welsh essay, but he certainly popularized it, and I think he's the one who's brought it to the attention of people like us. And so I think it is a really cool catch, and it is interesting, as you said, Welsh was the inspiration for Sindarin in the way that that Finnish was the inspiration for Quenya. And so here he's describing the other language that he loved enough to model an Elvish language on,
Right.
He's using another cellar analogy, a cellar metaphor for it. And he talked about, Welsh was full of cellar doors and also of words in which there is pleasure in the contemplation of the association of form and sense. So, I don't know. It's neat. It's neat that he apparently has this idea of a wine cellar or a cellar in his head as he's thinking about these languages he loves. And I think that's just super cool. It makes me think of language in a new way.
It does, doesn't it? It makes you approach it differently. Yeah.
Yeah.
It makes
Which
me wish I
Tolkien
could
has
speak
always
more.
done.
Yeah, you're right.
Yeah, no kidding, man. I mean, I wish I could speak or read.
Welsh and Finnish would be a start, wouldn't it?
1/10 of the languages that I'm familiar with.
One of these days, I ought to become more familiar with English. There are times I'm not sure I speak that.
Yeah. Although it's interesting, Tolkien was not, he spoke wonderful English and he wrote in wonderful English, but he wasn't really what we might call today a grammar Nazi.
No, no.
There wasn't there. Oh man, and here I'm revealing that I haven't looked this up, but wasn't there a letter where somebody asked him about the proper way to, whether to use like the singular form of a verb or the plural form of a verb? And he had this answer that was just like, basically he was not the kind of person who nitpicked on you should use who instead of whom here, or dangling a preposition or anything like that.
Well, he dangled a preposition at the end of the last chapter.
Right, that's right, he did. It's just interesting that he knew enough about language to not worry about those things. Right, it seems, and I think that's super cool.
Yeah, no, I agree.
I'll have to look for that letter that I'm thinking of, and
I'm skimming through the letters and trying to find something. But here's one that actually fits. It may not be the one you're thinking of, but it's letter 218. The letter was addressed to any professor of English language at Oxford, asking whether it's correct to say a number of office walls has been damaged or have been damaged. And he says, "Dear sir, your letter has eventually reached me, though I am not any professor of English language since I have now retired. The answer is that you can say what you like. Pedantry."
That is exactly the one I was thinking of.
Yeah.
Please. Yeah.
Pedantry insists that since number is a singular noun, pedantry insists the verb should be singular, has. Common sense feels that since the walls is plural and are really concerned, the verb should be plural, have. You may take your choice. Yours sincerely, J.R.R. Tolkien.
That's brilliant. I love that.
Isn't it? I found it almost by luck, sheer luck if luck there be. I was trying to look for verb, but my goodness, there were like 30 occurrences of that word because overburdened is verb is included in the word overburdened.
Oh man, right.
So there were like 6 of those. But I pulled one when I saw that pedantry was in the same sentence. I thought that might be the one Sean's thinking
That's
about.
the one. That's exactly the one. I'm glad you found that. That's awesome.
Man, I love ebooks.
Yeah.
Good stuff. Well, with that, I think let's go ahead and move into our discussion, shall we?
All right, let's do it.
Chapter 9 picks up exactly where we left off with not Thorin, but the rest of the dwarves, and I'm going to go ahead and read the first paragraph and a half or so. The day after the battle with the spiders, Bilbo and the dwarves made one last despairing effort to find a way out before they died of hunger and thirst. They got up and staggered on in the direction which 8 out of the 13 of them guessed to be the one in which the path lay. But they never found out if they were right. Such day as there ever was in the forest was fading once more into the blackness of night, when suddenly out sprang the light of many torches all round them, like hundreds of red stars. Out leaped wood elves with their bows and spears, and called the dwarves to halt. There was no thought of a fight. Even if the dwarves had not been in such a state that they were actually glad to be captured, their small knives, the only weapons they had, would have been of no use against the arrows of the elves that could hit a bird's eye in the dark. So they simply stopped dead and sat down and waited. All except Bilbo, who popped on his ring and slipped quickly to one side. As we talked about last time, it's not just having a ring, it's having the wits to use it at the right moment, right?
Right, yeah, absolutely. He knows this is the time to use it, and man,
boy, is
never a better time to use this ring.
Death was so close to them at this point. I mean, they're really realizing this is our last gasp. If we don't find a way out and a way to find something to eat, we're going to die.
Yeah, I mean, I think this use of the phrase "a last despairing effort," I mean, that kind of spells it all out.
Boy, doesn't it?
And even the fact that they were glad to be captured. I mean, they have no love for elves. Elves have no love for them, but they are glad to be captured because it's, well,
they have a chance of some food. Yeah, hopefully they'll feed me. Interesting, once again, we've observed so many times the dwarves' total lack of preparation that the only weapons they have were small knives.
Yeah, yep.
We're going to fight a dragon. What do you have with you? I've got a Swiss Army knife. It's 3 inches long.
Those tweezers, man. Those tweezers, we just...
Those could come in handy. That Phillips screwdriver, you never know when that'll be useful.
Yeah.
Oh, goodness.
Yep.
And then the elves and the fact that they could... the dwarves breathe so loud, we could have shot them in the dark.
Shot him in the dark.
Apparently, they could hit a bird's eye in the dark. So they're...
That's pretty amazing.
Yeah, really, really accurate. Kind of made me think, I didn't really take any notes on this, but I remember glancing at the idea of elf shot. I guess this was kind of an old, fairy tradition, the idea that if somebody was struck with some kind of really unidentifiable malady, that they were said to have been hit by elf shot. Did you remember reading any of that someplace?
Was that? I feel like there might have been something in Anderson on that.
Yeah, I think so. There was something in Anderson. I think there might have been something in Rateliff as well. But the interesting idea just being that it's caused by elves shooting these invisible arrows.
Yeah. It's the idea of for a primitive society that doesn't
understand medicine and anatomy.
Yeah, right.
It was things like arthritis or muscle cramps or things like that.
Right.
And so what would happen is they assigned it to elves because they would find these, old arrowheads, maybe the remains of, like Neolithic flint or something like that. And so they would attribute it to elf shot. So just a little sidebar on that. Kind of
I've actually got it right here. I found it in Anderson.
See, I don't have Anderson in front of me because I don't have an E version of it.
Yeah, it's actually the first footnote to this chapter. He says, elf shot was a name given to flint arrowheads that were supposed to pierce the skin without leaving a mark, causing disease in humans. Okay. Various afflictions like rheumatism, cramps, and bruising were attributed to elf shot.
Ah, there you go.
So there you go. Just what you were saying.
Yeah, awesome. I happen to remember enough of it to sound like I knew what I was talking about. How cool is that?
Yep.
So Bilbo gets the ring on just in time, follows the dwarves, and gets to the gates just in time. Mm-hmm. In fact, you're going to read that part, so I'm going to pretend I didn't say that and let you read your part.
It's all right. Everybody's read it before. We know what's happening.
I know.
All right. Across the bridge, the elves thrust their prisoners, but Bilbo hesitated in the rear. He did not at all like the look of the cavern mouth, and he only made up his mind not to desert his friends just in time to scuttle over at the heels of the...
Scuttle, I just had to point
scuttle
that out
again. I know, we had it in the last chapter too. Just in time to scuttle over at the heels of the last elves, before the great gates of the king closed behind them with a clang. Inside, the passages were lit with red torchlight, and the elf guards sang as they marched along the twisting, crossing, and echoing paths. These were not like those of the goblin cities. They were smaller, less deep underground, and filled with a cleaner air. In a great hall with pillars hewn out of the living stone sat the Elvenking on a chair of carven wood. On his head was a crown of berries and red leaves, for the autumn was come again. In the spring he wore a crown of woodland flowers. In his hand he held a carven staff of oak.
There's a little bit more here to unpack than one might think at first.
Yeah, there really is.
First off, I would love to hear what it is the elf guards are singing, wouldn't you?
I absolutely would.
I want to know. I want to compare this to the Goblin song,
Yeah. Yeah, you wonder if because later on in this chapter we do hear them sing a sort of a work song as they're hauling the barrels.
Right.
You wonder if it would be sort of a marching song, kind of like the Goblin, not like the Goblins,
not like
obviously.
it, right?
But
Snap,
would it be a marching
clap,
song?
The black crack. They're not going to sing that.
Right. No. But would it be a marching song, or would it be a "Wow, the caves are so pretty tonight" kind of song?
Right. Exactly.
Would it be a marching song or a tra-la-la-lally song?
Right. Exactly. Is it a
OMG cave, OMG stars, OMG beaches, OMG Thranduil? Yeah. You wonder.
Goodness.
It's a shame that we don't get it there.
I know. Really cool. And because
although there's a blink and you miss it moment of Bilbo almost thinking about deserting his friends.
Yeah. Well, I think
we talked
fear.
about his loyalty last time.
Yeah.
And here he is. He almost breaks this time. Yeah.
Yeah. And he only made up his mind not to desert his friends. I think there was something about that cave that scared him, and I got to tell you, it's probably because the last time he went into a cave,
he ran into a golem.
He ran into a golem and almost got eaten.
Yeah.
But yeah. I mean, what an interesting description of the caves themselves, right? These twisting, crossing paths. But the difference between them and the goblin caves, right? The
cleaner
smaller,
air,
the cleaner air,
less deep.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, you get the
and
feeling
they still
they're
are
also much
twisting and
lighter.
crossing. They're still twisting and crossing and echoing, but you don't get the sense of bewilderment that you got in the goblin caves.
No. And it seems like it's a fairly short march, perhaps, to the Great Hall.
Probably
you don't get that sense that this is taking them hours.
That it's taking forever. Yeah.
The appearance of the Elvenking is something worth talking about, isn't it?
It is.
Crown
I think
of
this
berries.
is really cool.
Yeah.
He has a seasonal crown. In autumn, he wears berries and red leaves, and then in spring, he wears woodland flowers. That just tells us that this Elvenking is closely tied to nature, and we know that that's that is the way with elves. Their life is artist life.
Yeah, absolutely. And
being a wood elf, a sylvan elf, we must Sindarin elf ruling over sylvan elves. We must assume that he probably is more attuned to nature than most elves.
That's true. That makes sense. And so he's sitting on a chair of carven wood, and he's holding a wooden staff. But his wooden staff is interesting. I wanted to talk about this because Anderson gives us something really cool in one of his footnotes there. He talks about this nature of oak in relation to fairy. He says that oak is traditionally a sacred tree. It was associated with the Druids and their sacred groves of worship. And then he tells us that in fairy lore, it has stronger magical associations when growing near ash and thorn trees, two other of the most sacred fairy trees.
Okay.
What's interesting about that is that all three of those trees are mentioned in a song, and we'll get to it, but not for several more chapters. It's on the way back. They're in Rivendell at that point. And on the return journey, those elves are singing, and the last verse has them saying, "Hush, hush, oak, ash, and thorn. Hush to be all water till dawn is at hand." So you get that reference to oak, ash, and thorn, which in fairy lore is, a real strong magical association. I never would have caught that.
I absolutely would. I mean, now that you say that about oaks, I did know that about the Druids.
Yeah, I did know about oaks. I didn't know
but
that
ash and thorn, I never thought about.
No. Very, very fascinating.
That's
stuff.
really interesting.
It's pretty cool stuff.
So I know the ash tree is also pretty significant in Norse mythology too.
Yeah, that's true.
I think the world tree is an ash tree, isn't it? Yggdrasil.
Yggdrasil? I don't remember.
What
sort of tree is Yggdrasil?
I'll have to look that up while you're reading your next passage.
That's a very good question. It is. It is an immense ash tree. You are correct.
There you go.
Wow. It's good to have you on the show. That's why I pay the big bucks.
That's Come on. It's all about the love.
The irony in that, by the way.
Yes. No, it's all about the love.
I will double your pay.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Now's our Firefly reference. 2 times 0.
Let's see, double
carry the
zero and carry the zero.
Oh, goodness. All right, I'm going to go ahead and pick up right after you left off, and right after that really cool illustration in our copy of the book, the Elvenking's Gate. Very cool little symmetrical drawing of the forests leading to the bridge, leading to the entrance to the cave. But
it's very orderly.
It is very orderly.
It's very, like you say, it's symmetrical, and it's very. The trees have a very kind of uniform spacing, and it doesn't. It's not a scary place.
No, you're right. It speaks
Bilbo's
of
reaction
culture.
to it, notwithstanding, but it's pretty.
It's pretty intimidating, I think.
It's intimidating. Yeah, that's a good word for it.
Yeah. So we'll go ahead and pick up exactly where he left off. The prisoners were brought before him, and though he looked grimly at them, he told his men to unbind them, for they were ragged and weary. Besides, they need no ropes in here, said he. There is no escape from my magic doors for those who were once brought inside. Long and searchingly he questioned the dwarves about their doings, and where they were going to, and where they were coming from. But he got little more news out of them than out of Thorin. They were surly and angry, and did not even pretend to be polite. What have we done, O king? Said Balin, who was the eldest left. Is it a crime to be lost in the forest? To be hungry and thirsty? To be trapped by spiders? Are the spiders your tame beasts or your pets, if killing them makes you angry? Such a question, of course, made the king angrier than ever, and he answered, It is a crime to wander in my realm without leave. Do you forget that you are in my kingdom, using the road that my people made? Did you not 3 times pursue and trouble my people in the forest, and rouse the spiders with your riot and clamor? After all the disturbance you have made, I have a right to know what brings you here, and if you will not tell me now, I will keep you all in prison until you have learned sense and manners. Next time my son forgets to say thank you, I'm going to keep you in prison until you've learned
sense and manners. They just kind of give you that look that, what?
Yeah, I know, seriously.
That would be my son. I would say something like that, and he would just kind of look at me and just say, what?
What's that from, Dad?
Yeah, right. What is that a reference to, Dad?
Right. He know that that's like something.
Everything you say is a reference to something.
Seriously.
That's how it is around here.
Because we all speak in metaphors and
we speak in geek references.
Yeah.
I would like to go back to the very beginning of that passage and talk about Thranduil, or the Elvenking, referring to his magic doors. I think it's really interesting that he uses the word magic here. Considering we don't really see the elves use that word very much. And in fact, the most prominent thing when I think of that word is Galadriel's objection to it in Lord of the Rings. Mm-hmm. Do you remember that? I think she hears Sam use the word magic, and then, when she shows him some of the stuff she can do, she says, "This is what your folk would call magic, I believe.
Oh, yes.
Though I do not understand clearly what they mean." And they seem to use the same word of the deceits of the enemy.
Yeah. Remember that.
It's just neat, we've seen the word magic in this book a few times, but this is the first time I think I've seen it in an elf's dialogue, and so it's just it's interesting because elves don't usually think of what they do as magic. Now, obviously, you can chalk that up to the fact that this was an earlier book. Tolkien was not originally thinking of it as being part of the legendarium. He's trying to keep it, kid friendly and so forth. But it's an interesting shift from an elf openly describing what he does as magic here to Galadriel later on in Lord of the Rings. Right.
No, you're absolutely right. And, we've seen magic, I think, 2 or 3 times just previously. We talked about the good magic that lingered, in the fire ring. There was another passage as well that mentioned magic just in the last chapter. So,
definitely
it's
comes up
different.
more in this book than in Lord of the Rings. Yeah.
Well, and we talked about that back in reference to the dwarven spells too. That's also a word that we don't see as much in the rest of the legendarium as we do here in the Hobbit.
Yeah.
And again,
I think Tolkien.
Tone.
Yeah, definitely. And I think Tolkien, as time went on, I think he started to shy away from the word magic more and more. And I think there was actually a letter. Letter 155 was the one where I'm not going to read anything from it, but he talked a little bit about his concerns with using the word magic. And remember, that's the one where he talks about
Goetia,
the magia and the Goetia, or magia and Goetia. Yeah,
that's the one. Take a look at that letter if you haven't yet. And what episode did we mention that in? Do you remember off the top of your head? Because I don't.
Honestly, I think it was in a postscript, and it was probably postscript to
to the one of the
Chapter
trolls
2.
with the because of the spells on
Because the dwarven spells, yeah.
that's the one.
But,
it would have been the postscript to that episode.
But
You're right.
check letter 155. There's some interesting stuff on there, just in the difference between different types of magic, what is called magic, and why the elves don't call it magic. Basically, just because it's just a power they have. It's something inherent to them.
Yeah, it's part of their nature.
The gist of it was magic is not something that you can study spells to learn.
Right.
It's an inherent power that elves have and is not attainable by men unless you're somebody like Aragorn who has some elven
blood. Right. Exactly.
Yeah.
I want to touch on this comment that Balin makes that actually gets Thranduil even angrier when he says, "Are the spiders your tame beasts or your pets if killing them makes you angry?"
Fighting words, aren't they?
Those really are. I don't know if Balin knows that or not, because he'd have to know the history of elves and spiders. I'm not even sure that Thranduil would know everything, but assuming he was raised in Doriath, he would. He would know. He would have heard about Ungoliant, and he would have heard about what she did to the trees. He would have known about the animosity that the elves have towards the spiders. And
the spiders that were in the what was the
Nandungortheb, right?
Thank you. Yeah. I'm trying to think, what was the scary valley in
the scary valley?
Silmarillion?
Scary valley that Beren went through. It was a scary valley.
It was a scary valley.
Nandungortheb, yes.
Thank you.
I believe. I think I'm right.
That's absolutely right. Yeah.
So that no wonder that Thranduil felt like, hey, this is really that's over the top, dude.
That tweaked him a little bit.
It did, didn't it? It tweaked him. Yeah, I mean, he's really like, dude, you're kidding, right?
Oh, no, you didn't.
Yeah.
No, you didn't.
And that sounds like something Thranduil would say, too. Oh, no, you didn't.
Oh, no, you
Snap. And so he's the one who points out, no. The spiders, don't be pointing that at me. That's you. You're the one who came in here and roused the spiders with your riot and clamor, which there's a phrase. I'm going to...
Yeah.
Your riot and clamor. What riot and clamor? All we did was walk into the clearing.
All we did was step into the clearing where you guys were partying.
Yeah, you want riot and clamor. You're the ones who are harping and singing and passing
laughing
bowls
and
passing
bowls around. And
all we wanted to do was say, "Excuse us, could we have some food?"
How dare you starve to death so loudly in my forest?
Seriously. Oh, what were your friends do? Probably starving. So he's a charming guy. Really, this guy is just, full of sympathy and pity and grace and mercy. Just a quality dude.
He's not a nice guy, but
he's not an evil guy.
No, he's not an evil guy.
And that's this notion that Tolkien always writes characters that are black and white. It's total hogwash. People who say that
absolutely
do not
is.
read.
Yeah. You're not reading the books if you think that.
No. I mean, this is a wonderfully morally ambiguous character here, isn't he?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he really is.
Let's do a quick sidebar. I want to compare the Elves of Rivendell and the Wood Elves. We've already talked about this, the less wise and more dangerous. But there was something that Olson said that I wanted to mention. He mentioned that they are more dangerous precisely because they are less wise. He points out that the Elves of Rivendell may seem silly, but they know stuff about Bilbo and the quest. That's their wisdom and their knowledge. And they're willing to help because of that. These elves, the Wood Elves, don't know anything about the Dwarves, and instead they have to rely on their assumptions about the fact that they must be enemies. And it's because of that lack of knowledge and those incorrect assumptions that they are suspicious and not only unwilling to help, but that they would go so far as to imprison them. So I really thought that was
a bit like we were talking about last time in the Barliman's Bag segment. But as Corey Olson saying that they're more dangerous precisely, I think you said.
Yeah, precisely because they are less wise. That's their danger, their status.
The lack of wisdom is why they are more dangerous.
Exactly. The cause is the lack of wisdom. The effect is their danger, their dangerous nature. Yeah.
Yeah.
Good stuff.
That's really interesting. Well, yeah, and we talked last time about how they are, they're insular. They're a bit very protective of their borders. They don't take kindly to strangers. You combine all that with a lack of wisdom.
That's a dangerous
combination.
You're right.
Yeah, it is.
I mean, in a way, like you said last time too, there's a good reason why they are protective of their borders. I mean, the spiders are
right. They're surrounded
by
evil terrifying things.
Yeah. And in Rivendell, that's not the case. Plus, in Rivendell, one could argue that their borders are somewhat magical. We see certainly that when they do find the valley, it's nigh unto impossible to find without knowing where it is. Even Gandalf, who'd just been there, couldn't find the place practically. And when they do go, there's this sense of really entering another world. I mean, it's fairy.
Right.
That's the whole point.
Yeah.
But, later on when we find out that, Elrond has a ring and we know the power of those rings in terms of preservation and protection, that, it wouldn't surprise me to think, well, we don't have to really watch our borders. They kind of watch themselves. I mean, maybe not quite on the level of Doriath.
Yeah, these elves don't have that. Yeah.
No, they don't. They simply are not as powerful. And so they have to rely more on their skepticism, if you will, their cynicism, really.
That's another very clear difference between them and the elves of Doriath. We talked last time about some of the ambiguity early on as to whether this was supposed to be Thingol or inspired by Thingol or something like that. But there's no Girdle of Melian here.
No.
They are protecting themselves.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a very good point and another great way to distinguish between Thingol and the Elvenking, who I have referred to several times as Thranduil, but let's be honest, that's who he is.
Yeah, that's who he is. And we might as well just eliminate any, ambiguity as in regards to it.
Let's be very clear. That's not a maybe or could be. That is.
No, he is Thranduil.
You have the next reading. It's a little bit further down the line. We see a little bit of an insight into Mr. Baggins, as the narrator calls him once again.
It's kind of a little. There's a little burglary montage that goes on for a couple paragraphs here.
Well, you've got the actual.
I've got the part after that, but there's a little bit of a,
Yeah, it talks about basically what he did, that he would slip out sometimes, and he didn't really like doing it because there was nothing of value. He couldn't serve any purpose while he was out there, and he didn't want to leave the dwarves. He couldn't keep up with the elves, so he was always afraid he'd get lost. So he ended up living by eating food off the tables.
Stealing food from store table, and I think it's really significant that it says he's stealing food.
Yeah,
we'll get back to that a little bit later on. But so I'll go ahead and pick up the paragraph after that.
You got it.
I am like a burglar that can't get away, but must go on miserably burgling the same house day after day, he thought. This is the dreariest and dullest part of all this wretched, tiresome, uncomfortable adventure. I wish I was back in my hobbit hole by my own warm fireside with the lamp shining. He often wished, too, that he could get a message for help sent to the wizard, but that, of course, was quite impossible, and he soon realized that if anything was to be done, it would have to be done by Mr. Baggins, alone and unaided. Eventually, after a week or two of this sneaking sort of life, by watching and following the guards and taking what chances he could, he managed to find out where each dwarf was kept. He found all their 12 cells in different parts of the palace, and after a time he got to know his way about very well. What was his surprise one day to overhear some of the guards talking and to learn that there was another dwarf in prison too, in a specially deep, dark place. He guessed at once, of course, that was Thorin, and after a while he found that his guess was right.
My goodness. So it's Groundhog Day.
Yeah.
I couldn't help but think of Bill Murray waking up every morning to I got
thing.
you, babe. The alarm clock. He's just having to keep on doing the same thing every day. Just, steal some food and go out with the elves, and I can't really do anything, and I can't figure anything out.
Just feeling kind of useless, and and remember, he's wearing the ring this whole time, and I can only imagine, again, with a hindsight of knowing Lord of the Rings, can you imagine what wearing the ring all this time must be doing to him? I mean, and again, here in this book, it's just a neat ring, and we don't want to lose sight of that, but think about actually wearing Sauron's Ring of Power for weeks, all the time.
I see you. Like over and over, I still see you.
Like, I know you see me. I'm trying to steal some lembas off the table.
Can you leave me alone just for a minute?
Just for a minute.
I also think we
go to the bathroom.
I know. We get this really clear, and there's Tolkien never tells us how that happens. Sorry.
That's true.
There was a thread going on about that, why does he not tell us about, people having to use the bathroom or take showers or baths? Because that would be kind of boring.
Because he wants to keep it high and purged of the gross.
Right. Purged of the gross indeed. Yeah. You want to know about people's bodily functions, play The Sims. Don't read Tolkien.
Yeah, no kidding.
I did like this reference, this Baggins toque reference again, right? We get this,
Oh,
I wish I was
absolutely.
back
Yeah,
in my
yeah.
Hobbit hole. But you know what? It made me think what made me think of the toque side was the line right before that. This, having to burgle the same house over and over is the dreariest and dullest part of this uncomfortable adventure.
Oh, it's the boredom.
It is. Sheer boredom.
He wants a little excitement. That's very Tookish. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
He's waiting for something else to happen.
But I have to say, there's something in the way he says this, the fact that he recognizes that first, that, this is the dreary and dull part, and then he wishes he was back home. It made me think of On Fairy Stories and how, one of the three things that we get out of fantasy is recovery, the recovery of the real meaning of things. This makes me think that in his experience now, he's recovered the true value of home.
Oh,
That
wow.
before it was an escape, and now he's really recovered its meaning. I don't know.
Yeah.
It just feels like that because now he's got that completion. He's got that toque side that's really strong now. So strong that he's complaining about being perfectly safe.
Yeah. It's not that he's complaining and he wants to be back home because he's tired of the adventure. He's adventured as much as his adventure's reached its sort of
Yeah.
I don't know.
It's peak.
It's peak for now.
Peak adventure, yes.
Yeah, and that's an really interesting thought and a good insight. I don't think I would
Every
have
once
ever
in a
picked up
while,
on that.
blind squirrel, broken clock.
No, you got a few more than that. But
Well, yeah, maybe.
I do think that it's interesting that at the end of that paragraph, again, he's referred to as Mr. Baggins.
Yeah. And
And
almost
so-
as though the narrator is, because he's actually saying what Bilbo's thinking. It almost like, well, nobody's going to get to do this unless it's Mr. Baggins.
Except for me, Mr. Baggins. Yeah.
Yeah. And then the idea, of course, that he
interesting.
wishes he could get a message to Gandalf. I mean, can't he just DM him on Twitter? I mean, dude, don't you have your phone? I don't know. Who in the world would
Get
he
a
get
signal. He can't get a signal down there.
No, the caves just mess with everything. I mean, there's a Wi-Fi. He can see the Wi-Fi, but he can't. It's password protected. He can't get on.
Probably is. But yeah, I mean, it's interesting because he is choosing at that moment to do something Tookish, but he's referring to him, thinking of himself as Mr.
As
Baggins.
Mr.
I think is
Baggins.
really key. Yeah,
And not as to be done by Bilbo.
yeah.
He does figure out where everybody is, and interestingly, they're not all like piled together. It's very interesting. That's a very, how shall I put this, inefficient way to build a prison in your palace, to have different cells all over the place. It seems a little over the top. They're all in different parts of the palace. Really?
Yeah.
Really? Who builds their jail cells like that?
I wonder if he has a whole lot of jail cells and he's just making sure to put them in
That's
separate
kind
ones.
of what I'm thinking.
Yeah.
Which doesn't really speak very well of him.
No, I think he's
he
just
can't
trying to
put
keep them
spiders
separated.
in prison. So who's he putting in prison when it's not the dwarves? Anybody
That's a good
else he can get his hands on is kind of what I'm thinking.
She's like, I can't wait to imprison somebody.
You're going to jail.
Who am I going to imprison today, Legolas? That's an interesting question. I
What
was
are we
just
going to
thinking
do
of
today, Thranduil? Same thing we do every
Same
day,
thing we do
Pinky.
every day.
Imprison anybody
Try
we
to
can.
imprison as many people as we can.
Imprison the world.
Try to imprison the world.
Okay.
Okay, Thranduil, but how are we
Narf.
going to find so many dwarves?
Narf.
Narf.
Oh, goodness.
I was just thinking of him keeping them separate so that
Yeah.
they couldn't communicate with
Right,
each other. But
right.
you're right. It is pretty
Different parts of the
inefficient.
palace, and then there's like a
Yeah.
really dark place where Thorin is.
Yeah.
Oh,
You
goodness.
just imagine like one of them's in a pantry somewhere. One of them's in like a janitor's closet.
Yeah, that's true. Maybe these are multi-purpose rooms, right?
Yeah.
Except for Thorin's. That's the pit of despair. The pit of despair.
See, if he's Count Rugen, he should have a pit of despair.
There you go.
Thranduil.
There you go.
Oh,
So
man.
a week or two of this sneaking sort of life. That brings us back to kind of our timeline, doesn't it?
Yeah, I think it's worth kind of talking about
Yeah.
how much time they really spend here, isn't it?
We kind of speculated a little bit about this a couple episodes ago, and then we talked about it in that episode's postscript. But we're going to expand on that a little bit here and talk from Fonstad's Atlas of Middle-earth.
Yeah.
She estimates some things, doesn't she?
She does, yeah, and she does some speculating. She kind of works with the few dates that Tolkien gives us,
right?
And then she sort of speculates the rest and does fantastic work. I mean, even like estimating how many miles per day the party would have covered walking through Mirkwood.
Yeah.
But what she came up with was, let's see, I've got it here. So July 25th is when the party entered Mirkwood.
Now, I should say that's based in large part on there are 2 firm dates we're given, right? We know that coming up is September 22nd. That's going to be the arrival at Lake Town with Bilbo's birthday.
Right.
And then the
because
other
we
day
learned in Lord of the Rings that was that was his birthday.
Thank you very much.
It's not mentioned here, but yeah.
No, that's correct. And then the other firm date we were given was Midsummer Day, right?
I think that's right.
Yeah. When they were in Rivendell.
Right. Yeah. So she estimated the time it took to cross the mountains and everything.
Yeah. Being captured by the goblins and then journeying and spending the day, total of 2 nights at Beorn's bed and breakfast.
Right.
So
right. Yeah. So if they entered Mirkwood on July 25th, and she speculates that they crossed the Enchanted Stream on August 15th. So we're looking at, 3 weeks
3
there just to get a little over halfway through the forest.
Yeah.
And then she's got August 23rd as the date of the spider battle and when Thorin was captured. And then the rest of the party captured the evening of the next day, August 24th.
Okay.
So that would have been about a month in Mirkwood.
That makes sense.
And then somewhere between August 31st and September 7th then, so if they were captured on August 24th, and he's
a couple
Bilbo's
of weeks,
been living like this for a week or two.
Yeah.
He's been living like this for a week or two.
Right.
And they were captured on the 24th, and that must mean August 31st to September 7th is when he's finding Thorin.
And at that point, she's working backwards because of the September 22nd date. So
Right, because she knows it's going to be a couple more weeks before they escape, and then, as you said, they make it to Lake Town on his birthday.
Yeah. Yeah.
So really, I mean, about a month in the Elven King's halls. It goes pretty quickly here in the book, but it would not have gone quickly
certainly
for
a
them.
good, you're right, from August 24th till September 21st, just shy of a month, after spending a full month in the forest itself.
Right.
This has been a long, difficult journey, really.
A very long journey.
It really has. So, but that was worth taking a sidebar on, just because, it really helps us to get a grasp on just how difficult and how taxing this journey has been.
Yeah, I mean, you don't quite grasp the magnitude of or the length of this stay.
No.
Because it Tolkien covers it pretty quickly. I mean, there's not much to say.
No.
It's just this Groundhog Day life over and over again. But
right, for a full week or two.
Man, it went on for a long time.
Yeah, even a week is a long time, but a week or two would stretch that out a bit. So, he does end up getting a chance to talk to Thorin. Thorin, of course, is stunned. Couldn't even believe what's going on. And then I'm going to pick up right after that.
Okay.
So it was that Bilbo was able to take secretly Thorin's message to each of the other imprisoned dwarves, telling them that Thorin, their chief, was also in prison close at hand, and that no one was to reveal their errand to the king, not yet, nor before Thorin gave the word. For Thorin had taken heart again, hearing how the Hobbit had rescued his companions from the spiders, and was determined once more not to ransom himself with promises to the king of a share in the treasure, until all hope of escaping in any other way had disappeared. Until, in fact, the remarkable Mr. Invisible Baggins, of whom he began to have a very high opinion indeed, had altogether failed to think of something clever. The other dwarves quite agreed when they got the message. They all thought their own shares in the treasure, which they quite regarded as theirs in spite of their plight and the still unconquered dragon, would suffer seriously if the Wood Elves claimed part of it, and they all trusted Bilbo. Just what Gandalf had said would happen, you see. Perhaps that was part of his reason for going off and leaving them. Oh, my.
Ding, ding, ding.
Yeah, perhaps. Perhaps, one might say.
Yeah.
Yeah. I do love Thorin's message, though. It's not, have hope. It's stay stubborn.
Stay stubborn.
Keep your mouth shut. Don't say anything. But even Thorin's opinion, we talked about this before. The other dwarves had a high opinion of Bilbo after the fight with the spiders, and now it's Thorin's turn. All of a sudden, he's got a high opinion. Yeah,
he's heard the story of Bilbo's exploits, and he's taken heart again. He was about to give up. He was about to reveal everything to the Elven King.
He was pretty close to it, or at least to offering him a share in the treasure. Yeah.
Yeah, and just knowing that Bilbo is still free and he's out there, that gives him the hope that he needs to keep going. And think about how important hope is in Tolkien's world.
Absolutely.
You know?
We've
And
talked
Bilbo
about
is now
that.
a source of hope for the dwarves, including Thorin.
Yeah, he had taken heart again, and that really is. I mean, that's just another word for hope, isn't it?
Yep.
I do notice though that they're not relying on Mr. Baggins to execute a wonderful plan. They're expecting him to think of something clever. They're not only wanting him to do the job of getting them out. They're wanting him to think of the solution to get them out.
Tell us what we're going to do. Yeah,
they're totally
exactly.
passive at this point.
Yeah. I mean, he clearly is he's the brains and the arms
everything.
and legs and the feet.
The
he's the
muscle.
operation at this
he
point.
is.
Yeah.
Yeah. He's just got 13 little tumors hanging around. I mean, who all want to share the treasure, but
Which they haven't even won yet. And
right.
Yeah.
I love that. I love the narrator's comment there. That that it's which they quite regarded as theirs in spite of their plight and the still unconquered dragon.
Yes.
Oh yes, there's
all
a dragon.
All those unhatched chickens that they're counting.
Yeah. Counting some big ones. That's pretty speculative counting right there. I'm not sure that their odds are any better than, I think I mentioned once before how I'll drive down the freeway and I'll see the sign that says, the lottery is up to $500 million.
Oh, yeah.
Or, 500, like 50 million or something like that. I'm like, how would I spend 50 million? And I spend the next, 20 minutes on the traffic jammed freeway thinking of what I would buy.
What you would do with that money.
Yeah, how many first edition Lord of the Rings I might get or something. And then
one for your co-host,
right,
of course.
Of course. So I snap out of it and I'm like, oh man, come on. I just wasted all that time thinking of something that's never going to happen. Well, the dwarves eventually get theirs, but realistically, they shouldn't be thinking like that.
They really should not think that they have a chance at this point because it's only through a series of very unlikely events.
Very unlikely
and the luck
events.
of the Hobbit that they managed to get it.
Absolutely. They would already be over if it weren't for the luck of the Hobbit.
Yeah.
But I do love this last line about Gandalf, don't you? That's just great stuff.
It's so great because, we've just talked about how much Bilbo's stock has risen with these dwarves, not just in this chapter, in this paragraph, but even the end of the last chapter.
Yeah.
And the narrator says is, just what Gandalf had said would happen. And we joke, perhaps that was part of his reason for going off. I mean,
he had other reasons, of course, but
he certainly did. But Gandalf knew. Gandalf knew this was going to happen all along.
Absolutely.
And I mean, they think of him as remarkable now. That's incredible. So
the remarkable
Gandalf knew what he was
Mr.
doing.
Invisible Baggins.
Yes, I love that too, Mr. Invisible Baggins.
Part of his name.
Gandalf knew. Gandalf knew this all along, and that's exactly why, more to the point, it's why he brought him on the journey in the first place.
Yeah, and why he kept saying there's more to him than he even knows.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Very, very cool stuff. Well, Bilbo doesn't
But
exactly
I do think it's
like
interesting that the very next sentence tells us that Bilbo doesn't really feel comfortable being depended on by everyone.
He doesn't want to be the leader. That's not the role he embraces or relishes.
Right.
And once
that
again,
strikes me as a very Bagginsy thing to think
at
this his most Tookish moment.
This is where he wants to think of himself as prosaic and not, poetic.
Yeah. I don't want you guys to depend on me.
He
Where's
wants
the wizard?
Very much the wizard, right? We talked about earlier how he wanted to send a message. Now he really, really wishes the wizard were around. And I love this thought. He sat and thought until his head nearly burst. It made me think of
Winnie the Pooh.
No, it actually. Oh wow, that's a good one too, though. I hadn't thought about that.
I think he thought in the most thoughtful way he could think.
I was thinking of the Grinch, and he puzzled and puzzled till his puzzler was sore.
Oh,
there was something about how he was thinking of some idea, and so here he is. He's thinking and thinking till his thinker is sore. His head.
There you go.
Burst.
Yeah.
So
I'm just thinking. Yeah, I'm thinking of the Winnie the Pooh.
That's awesome. That's a great one. I'd forgotten about.
And Winnie the Pooh just sitting there going, think.
You're right. That's right. I've now that totally comes to mind. I can see it. That's hilarious.
Because I have kids and I now know the entire Winnie the Pooh oeuvre.
Oh goodness, yes, I know. Have they watched? What's the cartoon that's one on Disney Channel? It's like they solve little mysteries. I can't remember what it's called.
Oh no, we haven't seen that one.
I think they stopped making it. There was like 2 seasons out, but my kids love it, or they used to. You know how it is. They like it for like 3 or 4 weeks, and then it's like they never want to see it again.
Yeah, right.
They've moved on to the next obsession.
Oh, I haven't looked for that one. We were watching all the old all the Winnie the Pooh movies for a while.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah.
No, this was some.
I tried reading the books to them, but they just didn't get into the books quite as much, even though a lot of it is the same as the narration in the movies. But
Yeah. Oh, it's My Friends Tigger and Pooh is the name of the show.
okay, I will have to look for that one. I've become a bit of a Pooh Bear fan.
And you do a good Pooh Bear voice. I remember there was that one where you said, "Oh, bothered," I just about lost it. It was so perfectly on point.
I've had a little practice.
Which
just
now
reading
means
the
you must
books
do
and
it.
stuff.
I've just summoned you. I summoned Pooh Bear. I've just done.
Summon Pooh Bear. Oh, bother.
There you go. Thank you, sir. Oh, my evening
You're
is now
welcome.
complete. Well done.
Think.
Oh, man.
Oh, man.
A wonderful thing
All
about
right.
tiggers.
As tiggers are wonderful things.
Yes. All right. So I'm going to have you read before we completely get
Let's keep reading.
Oh, come on. Eeyore's totally my character.
Yeah, he is. I'm sure you can do it better Eeyore than...
Oh, no, that's just who I am. I like walk around my
it's
whole
just,
life. I'm like
you just
Eeyore.
are Eeyore. I'm just feeling gloomy.
Yeah, nothing good is going to happen today. So.
Oh, Eeyore, what's happened to your tail?
Oh, dude, that is just awesome. I'm going to have to play that for my son. In the meantime, we've got like 3,000 people going, would you just get on with Tolkien, please?
Please read some
Please
Tolkien.
get on to Tolkien. So,
When did this become an A.A. Milne podcast? All right.
so I'm going to have you read that,
I'll
that next
go on and
paragraph.
read. All right. One day, nosing and wandering about, Bilbo discovered a very interesting thing. The great gates were not the only entrance to the caves. A stream flowed under part of the lowest regions of the palace and joined the forest river some way further to the east, beyond the steep slope out of which the main mouth opened. Where this underground watercourse came forth from the hillside, there was a water gate. There the rocky roof came down close to the surface of the stream, and from it a portcullis could be dropped right to the bed of the river to prevent anyone coming in or out that way. But the portcullis was often open, for a good deal of traffic went out and in by the water gate. If anyone had come in that way, he would have found himself in a dark, rough tunnel leading deep into the heart of the hill. But at one point, where it passed under the caves, the roof had been cut away and covered with great oaken trapdoors. These opened upwards into the king's cellars. There stood barrels, and barrels, for the wood elves, and especially their king, were very fond of wine, though no vines grew in those parts. The wine and other goods were brought from far away, from their kinsfolk in the south, or from the vineyards of men in distant lands.
Well, so, yeah, this kind of explains the king's attitude. He hadn't had his drink yet today.
Wow. Yeah, he's a bit of a lush, isn't he?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, he's got a problem.
Yeah. But good catch for Bilbo,
Don't take the moose, you'll kill yourself.
Give me the keys, Thranduil. Give me the keys to the moose.
Dude.
Give me the keys to the moose. Dad, give me the keys to the moose. I can't let you go out on the moose, Father.
Oh, my goodness. The
Oh,
moose
man,
is
that's
another, yeah, that's a whole other thing.
But yeah, good old Bilbo, doing some snooping around
Yeah.
and finding this finding this other way out. Doesn't seem like much of a way out, but
No, not much.
hey, you work with what you got.
That's exactly right. You're finding a way, because the other way out isn't a way out. We can't all
Yeah.
get out those gates. There's just no way.
Yeah.
Because as we read earlier, there's that line about one invisible ring is a great thing, but not much good among 14.
Right.
So,
But yeah, and a good thing, you got to wonder if there's a little luck here that the elves are so fond of wine, don't you? That they managed to, have all these barrels lying around.
Yeah.
And boy, they just happen to be there just in case.
and they happen to be
somebody
big
needs
enough to shove a dwarf in.
to shove a dwarf into. Yeah, I had to look into this whole question of wine because we don't really see a lot of references to elves drinking wine in Tolkien's works, do we?
No, that's true. I mean, in Lord of the Rings, we see wine associated primarily with hobbits, of course, but also men. Faramir's rangers, the Rohirrim, Denethor, even Saruman's human servants.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, the wine that Merry and Pippin found. And,
exactly.
When they
found the
hunters
wine
came
and
out,
the tobacco and the food, and it was tobacco.
Right.
tobacco.
Right, and it was tobacco. It was tobacco.
I'm just saying that.
They weren't sitting up on the wall like Cheech and Chong.
Oh my goodness. Merry and Pippin is Cheech and Chong. I now am never going to be able to get that image out of my head. Thank you, Sean. You've just ruined that scene entirely.
I know. I'm so sorry.
That's okay.
So
that
sorry.
scene was
That's what I think every time I watch that scene. It's a fun scene, but it's
okay.
it's definitely,
if you say so,
Cheech and Chongish. But no, I mean we typically. I went back through the books to just look for any references to.
Come on, Aragorn. You got to have some of this, man.
Well, see, I didn't do the voice, at least. You can't blame me for that.
Oh man. Well, now I'm not even going to be able to watch like Cars without thinking of that because he's the voice of Ramon.
Because he's the voice of
Ramon,
the little lowrider, right?
Yeah.
Why do I know that? I don't know why.
Because you've got kids and you've seen Cars like 8,000 times. Ramon paints you up right, man.
That's right. Yep. He's got a different brand new paint job every time you see him.
Every time you see him. And I make awesome paint job too, but yeah.
Oh yeah, sparkly and everything.
Oh yeah, metallic.
Anyway, yeah. So I actually did a little survey of elves drinking throughout the Lord of the Rings especially. And we usually see them drinking mead, which we talked about a couple
Were
episodes ago.
Were these random traffic stops or was this just asking? No.
The roadblocks.
Yeah, exactly.
Are you an elf, sir? Are you drinking, sir?
How many drinks have you had?
How many have you had, sir?
2. It's always just a couple, isn't it?
Step off the moose, sir.
Step off the moose. I'm going to have you walk a straight line for me.
Step down off the moose. But no, we usually see them drinking mead. We see Galadriel pour white mead into the cup of farewell when the Fellowship leaves Lorien. Yeah. And she also sings of sweet mead in the poem Nemadie, which you read about a year ago for Tolkien Reading Day. Beautiful. There's it's in Quenya is Miruvoreva, which is of mead. It's an inflected form that denotes the possessive or adjective case. But yeah, it's translated as sweet mead, and it's basically the word Miruvor, which is also the name of Elrond's homebrew at Rivendell.
Yeah.
So we know that must be a mead as well. So lots of references to elves drinking mead.
But not
go
wine,
back to
you're right.
But not wine. You go back to the Silmarillion, and the only time we see elves talk about wine is metaphorical. We see, do you remember back in...
Oh, I think I know which quote you're coming up with.
I can't remember exactly which chapter it was, but Angrod is talking to Thingol and Melian about Feanor. And he talks about how the Noldor became as if besotted with wine, and as briefly.
Yeah. That was it was right after the map chapter, wasn't it? So chapter 15 of the Noldor in Beleriand.
That sounds right.
Yeah. Boy,
so,
that was awesome.
Not a lot of references to elves and wine together.
No.
I mean, it generally kind of seems like elves, this sounds kind of silly, but the elves of the Lord of the Rings are kind of social drinkers, you know? And I mean that in like the most literal sense. They use mead in, ceremonies, the cup of farewell, to kind of bring people together at Elrond's house. They use it to, to relax and have good times, but they don't tend to overindulge.
No, we don't see a bunch of drunk elves running around. That's true.
No, not running around Lothlorien or Rivendell.
No.
However, the fact that they use the metaphor besotted with wine in reference to Feanor means that they must definitely have some experience with being drunk.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, to find actual examples of drunk elves, we have to look a little bit earlier.
Yeah.
And there's a really good one in the original version of the Lay of the Children of Húrin, which you've got there,
Yes, I do. We talked back in episode 36 about how Turin left Doriath after a fight with Cyros. Remember, we mentioned that we would be talking about Cyros soon. Well, here's that moment.
That's right, we did, yeah.
He's an elf of Doriath, for those of you who don't remember the Silmarillion, or at least who don't remember the tale of Turin. An elf of Doriath who taunted Turin one night at the dinner table. Cyros sees Turin come in from being in the wild with his clothes all worn out and his hair unkempt, and he makes fun of his appearance, provoking Turin into fighting back. I actually love the oldest version of the tale because he hurls like a pottery thing at his head and kills him right then and there.
That's right, yeah.
He falls back and hits his head and dies. But in the Silmarillion, we're told that Cyros had long begrudged to Turin the honor he received as Thingol's foster son. But in the lay, it's very clear that Cyros, who was called Orgoth in this early version, is drunk and belligerent. So I get to read some alliterative verse.
No, and I can't wait for this. Let's do it.
Then the fool's mirth was filled the more, to a keener edge was his carping whetted, at the clothes uncouth and the uncombed hair of Turin new come from the tangled forest. He drew forth daintily a dear treasure, a comb of gold that he kept about him, and tendered it to Turin. But he turned not his eyes, nor deigned to heed or hearken to Orgoff, who too deep drunken that disdain should quell him. Nay, and thou knowest not thy need of comb, nor its use, quoth he. Too young thou leftest thy mother's ministry, and 'twere meet to go, that she teach thee tame thy tangled locks, if the women of Hithlum be not wild and loveless, uncouth and unkempt as their cast-off sons.
Man, talk about some fighting words.
Boy, you're
man.
not kidding. You left your mom too young, because, if you were older, she would have taught you how to comb your hair, unless, of course, she was as crazy as you, with,
Right.
uncouth and unkempt. Wow.
Yeah. Unable to take care of themselves.
Yeah. Here's my
Yeah,
comb.
I mean,
you need it.
I think in the final version, he even, he brought in, kind of made more of a reference to, sort of offhand reference to his sister, didn't he? Like,
Yeah.
It was sort of an accidental reference to his sister, actually.
It really was.
It was a foreshadowing reference.
It was a foreshadowing reference about,
But yeah,
running naked.
them running wild, naked,
Like deer.
with only their hair to clothe them or something like
yeah,
that.
yeah.
Yeah, it's a great like stinking drunk bad choice moment
Seriously.
for Cyros or Orgoff as he's called there.
Well, and it's one of the last decisions he makes.
It is. Yes, it is. Yes, it is. But so yeah, there we see that elves, they might usually be social drinkers, but they are capable of getting drunk and doing stupid things.
Yeah.
Which is a far cry from if we're talking about weird moments from the movies, the Lord of the Rings extended scene with Legolas and Gimli in the drinking game.
The drinking game, yeah.
And Legolas, just sitting there drinking.
Pretending like it does nothing, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And obviously still, quite well in control while Gimli is literally under the table.
Literally under the table.
But
oh, man.
yeah, so yes, we will see more of this in the next part of the chapter, because I know we're getting close to the end here. But we'll talk
that's
a little
right.
bit more about...
We never bothered to tell people we were splitting this one up into two episodes.
Oh, no, we didn't. Sorry, folks.
That's right. Hey, we're splitting this up into 2 episodes, just so you know.
Yeah, there you go.
Let's give it the full Prancing Pony podcast treatment.
Sorry about that, folks.
No.
But so we'll be talking more about that next time, and we'll see, why this wine has, this is very special wine, and why it has the effect it does on these elves.
Yes.
And boy, does it have an effect.
Boy, you're not kidding. This is like, passed out with the motor running,
Yeah.
We're going to find out.
Yeah.
So, yeah, he does.
You fall asleep talking. That's some pretty strong wine. But I mean, I've had, I've had some wine in my day, but I don't think I've ever actually passed out while talking.
Whilst having a conversation with the butler or with the chief guard. Oh, goodness. Well,
butler, that's an interesting word too.
Isn't it?
I don't know why. It seems like an odd word to use.
It does. It's almost an anachronistic sort of word.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I may have to look into the history of that word.
I think we will for the next episode.
Yeah, maybe we will.
But that does finish up our chapter discussion for today. Please stick around, though. As you know, we're only a little over an hour into the episode, so we must have some.
Are we finished? I thought we had a couple more things.
Do we?
Yeah, we talked about Bilbo learns how the wine comes from Lake Town.
Yeah, that's true. I'm sorry. You're right. We do.
You want to go back?
I will let you go back because I feel entirely foolish now.
No, all right. Well, so Bilbo learns that the wine comes from Lake Town, right?
Yes.
And he has discovered that, or it says it seemed a town of men still throve there.
Right.
Which is interesting because Bilbo's discovering this for himself, but I mean, it was on Thror's map, so it's not like the dwarves didn't know about this.
It's not totally unknown.
Right. This is just to sort of set up what's going to happen next. Bilbo has discovered where the wine comes from, so that's where he's going to come up with this plan.
It's funny, he gets the details, but as a reader, you have to put two and two together. You have to figure out what plan is he developing based on these facts. But you know that he's learned about Lake Town. He learns about the barrels. He even learns that the barrels are tied together like rafts. and that when they're empty, they get thrown out those trapdoors and out the water gate.
Right. Yeah.
So I mean, it's a bit like a genius to figure out what he's about to propose.
True, that's true.
But they don't spell it out for you.
But you don't spell it out for you. It's kind of like a great heist movie. Like the heist montage where you're seeing like all the little pieces,
the little planning
getting put into place, but you don't see exactly.
I'm hearing Ocean's 11 music right now.
Ocean's 11 is exactly what I was thinking of. Yeah.
That's so cool.
But yeah, I think that's
probably
as far as we wanted to get in this one.
Yeah, no, actually, there's still more. No, just kidding. Had to do that for you because I felt so stupid there. No, that's really where we wanted to break it. We weren't sure where we were going to break this up, but there's enough to say in the next episode. We knew that if we tried to cover this in one, it would end up being way too long, or we would skip some of the cool stuff like that bit from the lay. And, there's just so much stuff here, and we really didn't want to miss any of it. We wanted to give it the full Prancing Pony podcast
treatment. Yep, always.
But that really will finish up our chapter discussion for today, folks. But stick around, even though we're only, about an hour 10 in. That must mean we have some good stuff coming up in Barliman's bag. And, of course, we still want to talk about what is still some big news for us.
That's right. As you guys know, the good stuff doesn't end when we stop the reading.
No.
You never know when Alan and I might actually disagree about something.
Like when
not saying it's going to happen today.
Like when the episode actually ends. That might be something we disagree about.
There's that.
Yeah.
I'm not saying that's going to happen in Barliman's bag today, but you never know. Stick around because, you never know when those fireworks might show up. But for now, why don't we go ahead and get to that big news reminder?
Sure. We've been talking about this for a few weeks now, but if you follow us on social media or you have been paying attention to the last few minutes in an episode, you have seen or heard that we have been invited to be special guests at Mythmoot 5, which is taking place out in Virginia in June. It's pretty much near D.C. I mean, it's right outside D.C. I think, I don't remember, was Alexandria? No, I don't remember Leesburg, there you go. It is really an incredible opportunity. Sean and I are super thrilled to be a part of it. Can't believe it's happening.
Yeah, it's really going to be amazing. And we're going to be doing something very special while we're there, a live episode broadcast. We're going to be in the main room,
because we're stupid.
Folks.
Because we're literally crazy to do that. But that's okay.
Because yeah, I know.
We've not been humiliated enough, really, is what we're talking about.
Yeah, when we can pre-record and edit things. No, we're going to do it live. In the main room with no other events scheduled during our time slot, which means that everyone at the conference will be there to see us potentially fall flat on our faces.
Quite potentially.
Or have the time of our lives.
There you
which
go.
I think
that is
probably what's going to happen.
And because we're interviewing some amazing people, that's more likely.
We really are, yeah.
And that's going to be so cool. We're going to have John Garth and Corey Olson come back on the show. We're also going to get a chance to speak with Douglas A. Anderson, the editor of the Annotated Hobbit, whose work has been incredibly helpful.
That's right. And also Mark Ockren,
yes.
the language inventor who invented Klingon. Which I know is really exciting to both of us. I don't know what that means.
Success, I believe, is what it means.
It sounds awesome because I know nothing about Star Trek, but I do know a little bit about Conlang.
There you go.
We're both excited about that one for different reasons.
We really are. Now, that show's going to air live on Facebook at the time of the event. If we can figure out how to distribute it to other channels, we will. I think the software we use, because it's not a fancy paid program, it's open source. I think it only can allow one stream to go out. So I don't know if we can do Facebook and YouTube and Twitch or whatever. We're not even on Twitch. So whatever we can, if we can get it out on YouTube at the same time, maybe we'll get a link on Twitter to one of the feeds. Somehow we'll figure it out. But it is going to be live on Facebook for sure. So it may just be we direct everybody there at the time of the event, and we believe that's Saturday. I don't remember the date off the top of my head. It's the Saturday during Mythmoot. There's only one of those.
Saturday the
June 21st?
Find that real quick.
20 something?
I think it's the 23rd.
23rd, that sounds right. 21st is the day that the event starts, that Thursday. So Saturday the 23rd.
Saturday the 23rd, and we think it's about 1 p.m. Eastern.
Yep, it's right after lunch. It's 1 o'clock Eastern, and we'll go for 90 minutes.
That's right.
Yep.
And then we're going to be releasing that the next day, right, as episode 88?
Yeah, I'll do a little bit of editing that night so that at least the perpetual version won't be totally humiliating.
There you go. And if we stay on schedule, if we plan this out right, that event is actually going to take place right as we're wrapping up The Hobbit and getting ready for season 3.
Yeah, Fellowship. Can you believe it?
Really was pure coincidence, we promise.
That's true.
We're going to take advantage of it.
Yes, we will.
It's just really cool.
Absolutely. Perfect timing. Mythmoot, I think we told you this already, they are covering our event registration, which includes our meals, so that saves us a chunk. But we do still have to find a way to get there. And I don't know if you've looked this up lately, but airfare from California to Virginia and from Texas to Virginia, it's not cheap. So
It's not cheap.
The Eagles still aren't available. And so we're looking to actually have to fly in a real mechanical plane.
Yeah, as boring as that may be. So we are coming to you, our friends and listeners, to ask to consider joining our Patreon family.
Yeah.
Patreon.com/prancingponypod. Now, we weren't going to do a live episode from a moot until we got to our next goal, but when this opportunity presented itself to us, we just couldn't turn it down. So we want to do this. We think it's going to be great. We think you're going to love it, but we're coming to you to help us make it happen.
Absolutely. I have to admit, we don't especially like having to ask, but those travel costs are significant, so we're trusting you to support us in this. We're super grateful for the things you have done for us so far. I mean, after all, it is thanks to you that we've been able to, thanks to our Patreon family, that we've been able to make the improvements to the show that we've made, some of the technical things, the production and post-production, as well as our move to weekly episodes, which has been incredibly time-consuming. But, that's all thanks to Patreon. So to make it worth your while to join up, we have some really fun rewards, too. And one of those rewards is exclusive content. And exclusive content includes things like our postscripts to each episode. As I've said a few times before, we record episodes a couple of weeks in advance, and then we listen to them. And before they release, we prepare a postscript that, just kind of covers any jokes that maybe fell through the cracks or anything we got wrong that we want to correct or something we wish we'd done a little more research on. Anything that Sean got wrong.
Yeah, it's usually
no.
me, unless it's a pronunciation thing, in which case
it's all of us.
Yeah. Conservation conversation. It's an equal. But we put all of that into that one. We put all of those into an info-packed 10 or 15 or so minute postscript that's available to our Patreon supporters. Yeah, and that postscript does usually release the same day as the episode it follows. So if you want access to those bonuses, and let me be clear, there's 16 of those postscripts so far, totaling 4 hours of exclusive content. So it's worth it. There you go. Be sure to join the Fellowship of the Podcast. And again, thank you, those of you who've already joined. We really appreciate you. You are helping to make the show even better. And we want to give our very special shout out to D. May in Alaska and James in Virginia. They are our patrons at the Kierdan's contribution tier. Folks, if you want a personalized shout out on our episodes, well, now you know where to go. And while we truly do appreciate your support, please don't feel obligated. We would love you to join the Fellowship of the Podcast if you can, but only if you can afford it, and if you think we've earned it. We know some of you can't or are choosing to support us in other ways. That's fantastic. We need your retweets, your shares, your telling your friends, talking about us. We appreciate all the support you provide us. So even if you can't join us on Patreon, keep enjoying the podcast, keep talking about it. We'll keep making it, and we will continue appreciating your support. Absolutely. We certainly will. So, Sean, why don't we go ahead and get on with Bartleman's Bag? Okay, well, I think we can get through a few tonight. First of all, we have a question from our friend Paul D. in Bristol, who asked a question about one of our recent episodes. He said, I'm wondering what you think when Beorn says to the horses that the strangers don't seem dangerous, and so dismisses them, as surely he wouldn't need the horses to help him defend himself. I just find that a little odd, seeing as Beorn is so powerful by himself. Good point. So, Alan, why don't you take this one to start? Well, to quote Peregrine Took, the mightiest man may be slain by one arrow. Clearly Beorn can handle himself in a fight. It doesn't mean, though, that he wouldn't want to have some backup around in case brigands or goblins stopped in unexpectedly. I'm not sure, though, what horses would do against wargs, but, there are any number of ways his enemies could... Maybe just allow themselves to be eaten, giving themselves up. Here, I'm a nice, meaty horse. I'm just going to lay down right in front of you here. Okay, that made me think of the cow at the restaurant at the end of the universe. The cow from Restaurant at the End of the Universe? Yeah. I'm particularly tender. Got some really nice meaty bits here. Arthur suddenly wasn't very hungry. Are you sure you don't want me? I'm delicious. Try the gray stuff. It's delicious. Don't believe me? Try the gray stuff. It's delicious. Ask the dishes. Ask the dishes. So there are any number of ways, of course, that, Beorn's enemies could sneak up on him out there in the wild. I mean, this isn't, it's probably pretty easy. Sure. Until he's certain that his visitors aren't goblins or wicked men who might be trying to draw him out for an ambush, he would want to keep his animal servants around. Why not? Yeah, absolutely. just have more people as backup.
Right.
Why not?
Well, people.
And that's assuming,
people's in air quotes
or
there.
people, creatures, more things, more bodies.
Yeah.
And that's assuming that the horses would actually be there to defend him, as opposed to just being there to help him run away if needed.
That's true. Yeah.
Now, okay, let's be fair. Beorn would probably only run away if he were really outnumbered.
True.
But, if he needed to, hop on a horse and escape, or feed a horse to a warg and escape, well, he probably would. He would not do that. Beorn loves his animals
Everybody
too much.
needs a meat shield. Everybody needs a meat shield.
The horse can tank for him while he casts an evac spell.
There you go. That's awesome.
Or just being there to run and get a message to somebody else who's friendly. Yeah. Maybe get a message to some of the woodmen or even Radagast or something like that.
Well, he's he's going to be helpful.
Yeah.
These are Roscabel rabbits.
He's all right as wizards go.
Well, as wizards go, yes. It is of some use being a wizard then.
Yep.
I guess he might keep them around if he can't find a phone booth in which to change into his bear form. But anyway,
right.
Thank you for that one, Paul.
He's got the big blue tights with the bee.
With the bee.
Big bee on it.
Oh, man. That was a good one, Paul. Thank you so much. Sean, what else do we have?
Well, Kevin H. from Summerhill, New York, wrote in to ask us a question that I found especially relevant this chapter, what with the, let's just say the moral ambiguity of Bilbo stealing food to survive while the dwarves are in prison. And this kind of harkens back to our interview with Professor Michael Drought back in episode 66. So Kevin said, at the end of the interview, Mike threw away this comment about there being a difference between burglars and thieves.
Ah, yes, he did.
I would like to hear your thoughts on what Tolkien intended philologically when he used the term burglar for Bilbo's role in the dwarves' party. Maybe an opportunity here for some word nerdery.
Uh-oh.
Oh, Kevin, you know me so well. I find it interesting, Kevin says, and perhaps significant, that Bilbo is a burglar to the dwarves and a thief to Gollum. Can't be coincidental.
Nope, probably not coincidental. Okay, next question, because word nerdery, I mean, we're going to be here for another 25 minutes now.
Yes, indeed.
I can't help thinking, Sean, that since you have been directly invited to engage in word nerdery, that you are probably planning to do so right about now.
Oh, you know me so well, too, yes. It is an excellent catch, Kevin, and I don't think I had actually thought about that distinction before you brought it up. But now that you mention it, you're absolutely right, and I'm convinced that the use of the two different terms is absolutely not a coincidence.
Right.
I did a word search, again, ebooks for the win.
Yeah, you're not kidding.
And discovered that only 3 characters ever call Bilbo thief in this book. So you've got Gollum,
right?
Smaug,
of course,
and Thorin, who actually says on his deathbed, he says, "Farewell, good thief," to Bilbo.
Deathbed. Spoiler alert. Just saying.
Oh, sorry. Yeah. What's the? It's like the thread on the Tolkien Society Facebook page about Thorin's death that's been going for years. So all 3 of those characters, Gollum, Smaug, and Thorin, have had Bilbo steal something from them.
That's right.
Right?
That's right. You're right.
So Gollum, it's
the ring from
right?
Gollum, the cup from Smaug's hoard, and of course the Arkenstone from Thorin, who Bilbo gave it to the Bard and to the Elvenking.
Right, exactly. That's the only 3 times that the word thief is used in this book.
Yeah.
It's used multiple times by each character, but it's only those 3 incidents, I should say,
right. That's true.
In which Bilbo is ever called a thief. Everywhere else, he's called a burglar.
Huh.
So I did some etymology, research on this. The Oxford English Dictionary defines thief as a person who steals another person's property, especially by stealth and without using force or threat of violence. Now, it's a Germanic word with cognates in a host of Germanic languages. The exact history is hard to pin down, but that's enough for our purposes.
Okay.
Let's compare that to the definition and especially the etymology of burglar. Burglar is a person who commits burglary.
Okay,
okay, that doesn't help. Thank you very much. Look up the dictionary definition of burglary, and it says illegal entry of a building with intent to commit a crime, especially theft.
Okay.
And it comes from a Latin word, burgare, which means to break open, which actually is derived from burgus, fortress or castle, which is a Germanic loan word
like
that
burg.
comes from the Germanic word burg, borough, all those words for fortress, castle, city. Yeah. So the definition of thief is focused on the stealing of another's property. The definition of burglar, and especially its etymology, are focused on the breaking and entering aspect.
Yeah.
Now, it's a very subtle distinction, but we know Tolkien was attuned to these things, especially when it comes to actual etymologies. And I think that's what he's doing here. I think the reason the dwarves think of Bilbo as a burglar is because they're thinking of him primarily as somebody who can break into the hoard and get them access to it. Whereas when Gollum and Smaug call him a thief, they're thinking of him actually stealing their property.
Stealing something. You're right. Well, it's even the same thing with Thorin, although when Thorin calls Bilbo good thief, at that point he's being ironic.
Yeah, that's true.
I mean, he's trying to reconcile with Bilbo at that point. You know, with my legal background, I immediately went to the concept of breaking and entering, sneaking into a place you don't belong in order to commit a crime, usually theft.
Sure, yeah.
Theft, which is, of course, what a thief does, can be something a burglar does, but one doesn't have to be a burglar to be a thief, right? I mean, a pickpocket is a thief, but he's not a burglar.
Yeah.
So, you know, if we did a Venn diagram, and you know I love Venn diagrams,
yes,
there'd be overlap, right? But neither's going to be a full subset of the other. Not all burglars are thieves, though most burglars are burgling in order to commit theft.
Right, yeah.
And not all thieves are burglars. Very interesting.
And you can imagine the dwarves thinking of Bilbo as sort of being on that little sliver of burglary that doesn't involve actual theft.
Right.
Because, of course, they don't think of it as stealing because he's just getting their treasure. Yeah.
Right. So what about Bilbo's insistence on thinking of himself as a burglar? You know, I mean, here he complains that, you know, he's a burglar that can't get away, must go on miserably burgling the same house day after day.
Right.
And if I remember correctly, I know we haven't gotten there yet, but when he takes the Arkenstone and puts it in his pocket, he says something like, now I am really a burglar. Now I'm a burglar indeed, or something like that.
Yeah.
At that point, he's clearly stealing.
He's actually stealing at that point. Yeah.
He's already in. He's already committed the burglary aspect. So now he's just committing theft.
You know, I think in both of those cases, I think it's just a matter of trying to be comfortable with his choices. You know, thief in this book is such a derogatory word, and it's only applied by the victim of the crime to the perpetrator of the crime.
Well, if you want to call stealing from Smaug a crime, but yeah, you know what you mean.
Right. Yeah. To whoever's done it, yeah. Bilbo wouldn't think of himself as a thief. He doesn't want to think of himself as a thief, even if he's thieving food from the Elvenking's table.
True.
And I think he's just he's made up his mind by this point that burglar is the polite word for what he is. And so that's what he calls himself. You know?
Yeah. Really, I mean, the etymology of the word does suggest that a burglar has every intent to be a thief. So, you know, it may be a distinction without a difference, really. Yeah.
I mean, I think it probably is. I think it's all a matter of point of view, really.
Yeah. That's a good point.
If you're stealing from someone who, you know, if you're stealing back your property, I think that's how the dwarves make their peace with it. But
I definitely don't think it's coincidental because, you know, the more I think about it, if burglary comes from a Latin root, that's like the last sort of thing that Tolkien would use on purpose. He must be using it. I mean, he really is using it to be different from thief, because otherwise he wouldn't use a Latin word. He would find a Germanic word.
Yeah. And so I don't think that there's really much of a practical difference, but certainly a difference in the way the characters perceive it.
Yeah, especially Bilbo.
Yeah. Anyway, thank you very much, Kevin.
Oh, yeah. Thank you, Kevin.
Yeah,
Sorry,
I just want to say,
over you.
No, that's fine. I always appreciate an excuse to look up some word origins, so thank you, Kevin, for that one.
Yeah.
I think we've got time for one more, don't we?
Sure, yeah. As long as it's not too long.
I don't think this one's too long. So this one's been in the bag for a really long time, actually. This came to us some time ago from Josie in Rhineland-Palatinate, Germany.
Wow.
And she wrote in saying, one of my favorite characters in the whole of Tolkien's work is Thranduil, the Elvenking. I would like to know how you would have portrayed him in the movie, or what you think of the way he is presented in it, especially in terms of his relationship to his son in the Sylvan Elves, but also concerning his actions and behavior in the Battle of the Five Armies, and the wounds and the reasoning behind him he was shown to have. Now, I will admit, you know, we probably gave Josie the answer she was looking for some time ago, because, you know, when we talked about the movies in episode 51, I think we talked about a lot of this. But I don't know. It feels like since we've been talking about Thranduil, it seems like a good chance to go back and discuss this, you know, without beating up on the movies too much, and just talk a little.
Fine. I'll take the hint.
There you go. And just talk about it a little bit more before we really get to know the character the way Tolkien wrote him. So, I don't know. Do you want to start?
Well, sure. I mean, you know, how would I have portrayed him in the movie? I probably wouldn't have portrayed him as some androgynous pretty boy with a dragon scar and a penchant for shiny robes, and a very large moose.
And a very large moose.
And a superiority complex. And, well, anyway, this could go on for a while.
Such nice hair.
And beautiful, beautiful hair.
Yeah.
Here's the thing. The text describes these elves, we've gone over this a number of times, as being more dangerous and less wise. Their fault is distrust of strangers. And then he, of course, is described as having an additional weakness for treasure and that he's greedy, right? His hoard was rich, but he was ever eager for more. His dislike for Thorin and for dwarves in general could, if we're using modern terms to describe it, it could be described as kind of racist. I mean, he believed elves to be superior to dwarves. But before we go any further down that road, I want to say it's usually fruitless and almost always problematic to apply modern moral concepts to characters in a fictional world. I mean, the truth is, in Middle-earth, I'm sorry to break this to you, elves really are superior to dwarves. I mean, they're immortal, they're wiser, they're the original children of Iluvatar. They really are just better. So I don't want to dwell on that piece. Most of the stuff we see in the films is just, made up fluff to fill in a character that Tolkien didn't really spend any time describing. The nonsense about the dragon wound and the death of Legolas' mother is just that. It's nonsense. I mean, all right, I need to stop. But the usual disclaimer after having said anything that could be considered bashing the films, I do fully understand the need to flesh out a character for cinematic reasons. I don't have a problem with the fact that, he loved Legolas's mom and she's dead and he got dragon scars or whatever. I mean, okay, that's fine. That's the film version of the character. But, that's way more than Tolkien would have given him because Tolkien just didn't give him that much description.
Right.
And what made him sound like Thingol, really. Yeah.
Well, and I will say, in defense of Peter Jackson's Hobbit, which is a phrase I don't think I've ever uttered before, I would say that
was almost a spit take moment right there. In defense of Peter Jackson's Hobbit films.
I don't think any movie's ever gotten the Elvenking quite right. I mean, I'm thinking of the Rankin Bass.
The Rankin Bass
as
one.
much. And I like the Rankin Bass Hobbit. I think the Rankin Bass Hobbit is a lot of fun. But
not the Elvenking.
Elvenking in that, I mean, he's got that green gray skin, and he's all wiry, and he's got the voice. His voice is like Otto Preminger. I mean, it's not.
No,
I mean,
it's bizarre.
Lee Pace is a breath of fresh air compared to that in a lot of ways.
He really is. You're right.
But I think it is true.
Man, never thought I'd say that.
There's a lot there that I think was just a little bit off the mark. And I think for me, the key to understanding Thranduil or the Elvenking is to think about some of the things we've discussed in our last couple of episodes. He's a Sindarin elf who moved back to Mirkwood to rule over Sylvan elves, partly as a part of a superiority complex, but also partly to embrace their way of life.
Right.
And put some distance between himself and the High Elves in the West. He's greedy. He loves treasure, but he doesn't really take the time or effort to have his people mine or do smithing or trade. His people are hidden. They're protective of their borders. They're at war with the evil around them in the forest.
Right.
And so they don't make friends easily. Obviously,
no.
He doesn't love dwarves, and he thinks of them as enemies. But despite all that, he and his people are elves, and that is good people.
Good people. Yeah.
And I think you talk about the idea of kind of portraying him as racist, and I think one thing they tried to do is I think they tried too hard to make him a villain. Or at least more of an antagonist. I mean, he's a bit of an antagonist here because his goals are different.
He is an antagonist here, but not
a villain.
That's right.
Not a bad guy. Not an evil. They kind of put him in that Denethor role.
They really. That's exactly who I was thinking of. Because it's the same thing where they took a character that was somewhat antagonistic and had a different point of view and a different perspective and was kind of counter to our main characers.
Right.
But in the film, they turned him into a full-blown villain.
Right. And it's all about that theme of disunity. We talked about that theme of, the fact that a character has a different point of view, a different opinion about the way this war should be carried out is enough to make them a villain in the movies.
Yeah.
And that's what's going on with Thranduil. That's what's going on with Denethor.
I think you're right.
In Tolkien's version, Thranduil is flawed. He's far from morally perfect.
Oh, yeah.
He's certainly not the worst elf we've ever seen, but he's far from perfect.
Myglin,
Fëanor. Caranthir, Celegorm, perfect.
Yeah.
Pretty much anybody whose name begins with a C.
Just about.
Except for Celeborn and Celebrimbor. But no, I mean, he's far from perfect, but he's still generally a good guy, even though his goals are just different from Thorin's and even opposed in some cases. I think he's proud, but I don't think he's racist, and I think you're right that it doesn't really make sense to try and apply that term or that concept to Tolkien's world.
No.
He's certainly not genocidal.
No.
And he's certainly not going to advocate killing dwarves for no good reason, which I think is something we saw in the movies. I mean, if he wanted to kill dwarves, he could have killed them here.
Yeah.
But he doesn't. He feeds them, he shows them mercy, and again, he's still an elf. He's still one of the good guys.
That's true.
So.
Awesome. Well, that was a good question. Thank you, if you're even still listening to us, Josie, because that's been well over a year, but thank you for that question. Folks, that does wrap it up for another episode of the Prancing Pony Podcast, but still we're going to ask you, don't leave quite yet. Wait for the very pleasant music. We do thank you again, though, for joining us, and we look forward to having you back again with us next week when we wrap up Chapter 9 of The Hobbit.
That's right, my friends. You know, no Elvenking is going to be able to hold our heroes for long, no matter how luxurious his hair is. So find out how they escape in the next episode.
Does it involve his full, shiny, thick locks? Do they throw them out of a tower window? Or maybe several mice.
Always
mooses.
with the mooses, the mices.
Anyway, folks, we do want to encourage you all to read along and take notes in your copy of The Hobbit, so please check out the official library tab on our website, theprancingponypodcast.com. We've got links to everything from inexpensive paperbacks to some really good stuff in your Tolkien collection.
And also, if you wouldn't mind heading over to iTunes for us and leaving us a review, we'd really be grateful for that. Those reviews help us get more visibility in iTunes, and that translates to a bigger and more exciting community of Tolkien lovers.
Absolutely, and thank you to those of you who have. We do still read every single one of them, and we genuinely appreciate all the crazily kind things you say about us.
In fact, we've actually started picking out one special review each week to feature on our social media networks as our way of saying thanks. So if you'd like to see your name or whatever you've chosen as your alias, and hopefully it's clean, in lights on our pages, now it's easy. All you have to do is leave us a review.
Yep, Thankful Thursday.
And make sure you never miss an episode of the Prancing Pony Podcast by subscribing to our podcast through iTunes or your favorite podcast app. You can find us in just about any podcast directory. In fact, we're even on Spotify now.
Yay! And we're also on Potable as well. That's a podcast discovery platform. It finds new and emerging creators and recommends them to you, sort of like the Netflix algorithms. Other apps will still make you sort through clunky charts and find your new shows, but Potable learns your interests and recommends new shows and individual episodes, both big mainstream popular shows and undiscovered gems. So you can spend less time searching and more time listening.
That's right. And thanks to everyone who's become part of our social media family. We set out to start a Tolkien conversation that everybody could join. And that's why we have the online common room on Facebook at the Prancing Pony Podcast, on Twitter at Prancing Pony Pod, and now on Instagram, also at Prancing Pony Pod.
That's right. And one last thing, as always, don't forget to send your questions, comments, or survival tips for invisible burglars trapped in a magic fortress. Perhaps we should say, anti-boredom tips for invisible burglars.
Yeah, that too, yeah.
To barlaman@theprancingponypodcast.com. That's barlaman@theprancingponypodcast.com. And we'll try to get them into our next episode. Well, a little over an hour and a half, still far too short a time to spend amongst such excellent and admirable listeners. But until next time.
Farewell, friends.